power almost always announces itself as spectacle. Across the dark, sprawling history of the immortal world, power reveals itself through impossible, visceral feats. Fire roaring forth from empty air, reality warping into unrecognizable shapes, a silent, invasive touch that strips secrets from the soul as easily as peeling skin. But deep in the ancient stone heart of Volterra, seated at the center of the vampire world, rests a man who commands none of these things. He perches on a throne of cold marble, white hair spilling like frozen silk over robes that have watched empires rise and crumble to dust. His name is Caius Volturi. To the uninitiated, to young vampires still tasting the first rush of immortal hunger, he is often dismissed as the weakest of the three kings. They see a biological blank, a man with no psychic shield, no elemental command, no gift woven into the fabric of his soul. He cannot dig through thoughts and memories like Arrow. He cannot trace the invisible golden threads of loyalty and love like Marcus. By the biological standards of his own kind, he is a supernatural void. And yet for 3,000 years, he has been the figure the vampire world fears above all others. His name falls like a hush over coven rooms from Cairo to Denali. While others lean on the crutch of magic, Caius builds his reign on the purity of pathology. He is a living monument to what happens when an endless lifetime burns with one singular, unyielding obsession with absolute order. Today we move past the surface-level villainy of the Twilight saga to perform a deep tissue dissection of ancient fury. We trace how a man with no innate powers became the most feared architect of terror in immortal history. We unpack why Caius Volturi is far more than a king. He is the shadow that even the strongest vampires fear to cast. To grasp the jagged, unyielding edge of Caius's character, you must first step into the psychological crucible of his existence. Imagine 3,000 years spent in the constant company of gods. For 30 centuries, he has stood between two brothers who hold the keys to the universe in their palms. Aro is a psychic voyeur, living in the collective memory of every soul he touches. He collects lives the way others collect artifacts, experiencing the world through 1,000 shifting perspectives. Marcus stands as a tragic, godlike figure who sees the very fabric of social reality, the bonds that stitch people together and the fault lines that tear them apart. In this triumvirate of psychic titans, Caius is a glaring anomaly. He is a predator adrift in a room of sorcerers, a man bearing a steel sword in an age of unthinkable magical power. Yet the secret most people never uncover is this: his lack of a supernatural gift is not his weakness. It is the very source of his lethality, the engine that feeds his ageless rage. A mind reader might stumble upon a reason for mercy, a glimpse of trauma that softens the edge of judgment. Someone who sees the golden threads of love between two souls might hesitate to cut them, struck by their quiet beauty. Caius is blind to those nuances of the soul. He is deaf to the subtle music of human and immortal emotion. And that blindness is his deadliest weapon. The absence of a gift carved a hollow space in his spirit, and over millennia he filled it with the most terrifying force known to any sentient being: absolute, uncompromising devotion to the law. He cannot bend the world with his mind, so he bends it with iron will. He acts as the Volturi's compensatory mechanism, the blunt instrument that reminds the vampire world's so-called meritocracy exactly what happens when you step out of line. Consider the weight of the inferiority complex that drives him. In a society where status rises and falls on the gift you bring to the table, Caius arrived with nothing but the darkest, most violent edges of his own humanity. He had to become more competent, more ruthless, more unrelentingly terrifying than any psychic vampire just to hold his seat at the table. While Aro lingers, fascinated by the beauty of a newly discovered talent, Caius fixes his gaze on the throat. While Marcus drowns in the grief of ancient, frayed bonds, Caius calculates the exact measure of wood needed for a pyre. He has forged his so-called normality into a perverse form of perfection. He is the man who stays wide awake while the gods around him dream. Where Aro is a collector who wants to preserve what makes each vampire unique, Caius sees uniqueness as merely another word for unregulated. He is a cleanser, dedicated to burning away everything that does not fit his ordered design. His power holds no trace of magic. It is pure psychological intimidation, a performance so precise he knows even a flicker of hesitation would shatter the illusion of his authority. He never hesitates. He has turned his perceived lack into a cult of personality, and himself into the living embodiment of vampire law, as cold, immovable, and unforgiving as the marble throne beneath him. He has no need to summon fire with his hands. He is the one who decides who gets thrown into the flames. He is the judge who never listens to a defense, because he has already deemed your very existence an affront to his order. To truly grasp the shadow Caius casts across immortal history, you must first understand his relationship with the idea of filth. For him, the world holds no wonder, no room for evolution. It is a chaotic, sprawling mess that demands a surgical, often bloody, hand to hold it together. His obsession with the law, the sacred vampire statutes, has nothing to do with justice as humans or even moral immortals would define it. It is a tool for systemic, biological, and spiritual cleansing. His history reads not as a series of wars, but a string of purges. Take the Children of the Moon. His crusade against the ancient true werewolves was never a tactical necessity for vampire survival. It was an act of genocide, born from deep-seated pathological loathing. He hunted them to the brink of extinction because they embodied everything he fears. They were volatile, unpredictable, fundamentally untidy. They shifted shape, lost themselves to the lunar cycle, and left a smudge on the clean, cold glass of his carefully ordered reality. This is the hallmark of the pathological mind, a desperate, violent urge to destroy anything that cannot be categorized, labeled, and locked neatly inside a cage of rules. Any creature that falls outside the strict binary of vampire or human reads to him as an abomination. His hatred of half-vampire hybrids and his legendary terror of immortal children stems from far more than fear of exposure. It is a projection of his own internal terror of losing control. When he looks at a hybrid like Renesmee, he sees no miracle of nature. He sees a variable he cannot calculate, a direct defiance of the purity he has spent 3 millennia enforcing. Unique is merely a synonym for unregulated in his eyes, and in the kingdom of Caius Volturi, the unregulated carries a death sentence. Here, his cruelty transcends simple violence and becomes a form of high, dark art. He hides his own refusal to adapt behind the authority of the law. Consider the irony. While the rest of the world evolves, while human civilizations rise and crumble to dust, while moral landscapes shift and every generation rewrites the meaning of right and wrong, Caius remains perfectly static. He is a frozen snapshot of ancient Malice, a statue that breathes but never changes. He treats the changing world as a personal insult to his authority. Every new coven with an unconventional way of life, every vampire who chooses vegetarianism or seeks coexistence with humans, reads to him as a crack in the foundation of his palace. His response never wavers, absolute, disproportionate force. When he sentences an entire coven to the fire for one member's minor infraction, he is not punishing a crime. He is performing a ritual of absolute order, reminding the immortal world that in a universe of entropy, he is the only constant. His version of purity is a wall built around his own ego, erected to hold back the terrifying truth of his own potential obsolescence. He fears hybrids and shapeshifters not because they are monsters. He is a monster himself, but because they represent a future he cannot dictate. He obsesses over the cleanliness of the bloodline because his own soul is a cluttered, lightless room stuffed full of 3,000 years of unvented rage and unresolved insecurity. He does not crave a good world. He does not even crave a safe one. He craves a predictable world, one that mirrors the cold, unyielding silence of his own design. He would burn every coven in existence, salt the earth of every continent, until nothing remains but a sterile, quiet museum of his own making. Only then could he sit on his throne and breathe air unpolluted by the breath of the unpredictable. This is the architecture of purity, a fortress built of bones and statutes, constructed to protect a king terrified of a world he cannot parse through a psychic lens. It is the most honest form of tyranny, the kind that admits it destroys because it is afraid of what it might become if it stops. Why do we look at him and find ourselves unable to turn away? In a narrative landscape saturated with misunderstood villains, tragic backstories, and antagonists one therapy session away from redemption, Caius Volturi arrives like a breath of ice-cold, toxic air. He stands as the definitive antithesis of the modern redemption arc, a living monument to the aesthetic of the static man. There is something deeply, dangerously satisfying about that unchanging stillness. We live in a world that demands constant evolution. We are told we must grow, must apologize, must perform endless emotional labor, and must bend to every shifting wind of social change. Caius embodies the terrifying fantasy of being finished, of being so absolute in your convictions and your malice that the world must bend to you because you will never, ever bend to it. There is a dark, primal comfort in watching a being reach the end of his emotional development and settle on hatred as his final, perfected form. His frozen rage is far more than a personality trait. It is a full visual and cultural language. The dark academia aesthetic thrives on ancient libraries, marble statues, leather-bound books, and the cold intellectual elitism of a bygone era. Caius is its living god. He is the professor who would burn the library just to prove he knows the rules better than his students. The dean who would expel the entire world for a single smudge on the record. The way he moves, or rather the way he refuses to move, speaks volumes. He sits on his throne with a stillness so profound, it feels as though he has not drawn breath in centuries. It is a performance of high-functioning, aristocratic sociopathy that exerts a magnetic pull. He hands down a death sentence with the same emotional weight a mortal might use to comment on the weather. This lack of affect is not a void. It is a weapon. It tells you that you are so insignificant, your death does not even merit a shift in his heart rate. We are drawn to the purity of his hatred. In his mind, no gray areas exist. No nuanced perspectives, no alternative facts, only the law and the fire. For an audience drowning in exhausting moral ambiguity and tangled social webs, the binary certainty of Caius Volturi offers a form of dark, aesthetic relief. He is the predator who never pretends to be a protector. He does not want your love, your understanding, or your forgiveness. He wants only your total, silent submission. This is the magnetic pull of unapologetic malice. In him, we see the power to never forget a slight. 3,000 years later, he still hunts the descendants of those who crossed him. He is the patron saint of the grudge. In a digital age where everything feels fleeting, where scandals fade in a week and loyalties are as thin as a screen swipe, his ageless, unyielding fury feels like the only thing that is truly permanent. It is the allure of the immortal narcissist, the fantasy of an ego so vast, so unshakable, that 30 centuries cannot alter it. He embodies the terrifying freedom of never having to say, "You are sorry." He is the dark side of old money aesthetic, not just wealth, but the inherited authority of time itself. He treats the entire human race, and most of his own kind, as peasants squatting on his ancestral land. He has no need to be relatable. He is the king of the unrelatable, and that is exactly why he is the only Volturi who still feels dangerous. Otto is too playful, too charmed by his own curiosities. Marcus is too weary, too hollowed out by grief. Caius, he is always, perpetually, exactly what he was the day he was turned. How do you command a militia of gods when you are nothing more than a man with a blade? This is the central paradox at the heart of Volturi hierarchy. Look past the marble floors and crimson robes, and you will find the machinery of terror Caius has meticulously engineered. He knows power in Volterra is not measured by who can kill. It is measured by who can convince everyone else they are already dead. Under his hand, the Volturi Guard has shifted from a military unit into a grand-scale psychological experiment. A predator versus prey dynamic hums beneath every interaction, never sleeping. Even among his most trusted allies, even among elite guards like Jane and Alec, beings who can unleash agonizing pain or total sensory deprivation with a single thought, he ensures no one ever feels fully safe. He understands a fundamental truth of power. Absolute loyalty is born neither from love nor respect. It is born from the mental exhaustion of constant, unrelenting hypervigilance. He keeps his subordinates trapped in a permanent state of fight or flight, positioning himself as the only source of stability in their chaotic, violent lives. His outbursts are never accidental. They are calculated, theatrical performances calibrated to reinforce his status. When he screams for blood, when he demands total annihilation of a coven for a perceived slight, he is not losing control. Far from it, he is demonstrating what total control looks like. This is the genius of his malice. He has convinced a room full of the planet's most dangerous predators that they are lucky to be his servants. Fear lets him bypass their supernatural advantages, turning their gifts into tools for his own ends. Within the halls of Volterra, the greatest weapon is not Jane's mental fire or Alec's paralyzing mist. It is the sound of Caius's voice, dry as leaves scattered across a tombstone, pronouncing your fate before you even realize you have broken a rule. He has perfected the art of the weaponized state. Every execution carries a message. Every decree fastens another collar. He has built a system where survival depends on being more ruthless than the person beside you, while remaining perfectly, terrifyingly obedient to the throne. A guard afraid of the enemy is useful. He knows. A guard more afraid of their own leader is invincible. He does not merely rule Volterra. Once it. He is the ghost in the machine of the Volturi Empire, the one who ensures the meat grinder of the law never stops turning, even when Aro is distracted by his curiosities. He is the one who reminds the guards' so-called gods that they are still just blood-drinking beasts, and he is the only one with the will to put them down. This is the most terrifying form of leadership, the kind that demands you sacrifice your own humanity just to stay in the king's good graces. Caius does not want only your service. He wants your soul to grow as scarred and cold as his own. He is the architect of a collective trauma that is stretched across 3 millennia, and he calls it peace. As we reach the end of this dissection, we must face the ultimate truth of the Volturi. For 3 millennia, the world has looked upon the throne and seen 3 kings. But the secret of Volterra is this: only one of them truly understands the nature of the immortal. Arel wants to own the world. Marcus wants to leave the world. Caius wants to rule the world. He is the giftless king, the man who proved the soul outmatches every magical spark. He needed no elemental fire, no whispered mind tricks to bring the world to its knees. He needed only the purity of his pathology. Caius Volturi is the architect of a peace built on pyres, a king who turned his own blankness into a canvas for the world's terror. He embodies the finality of the law. When the fires are lit and the screams of the unregulated fade into the Italian night, Caius remains. He has no need for your approval, no use for digital likes or subscriptions. He needs only your fear, because fear is the one thing that never changes with the seasons. When you stare into the dark, do you see a monster you want to defeat? Or do you see a reflection of the uncompromising authority you wish you held? Are you repelled by the purity of his malice, or secretly comforted that in a chaotic universe, someone is finally keeping score? Caius Volturi is the shadow that reminds us light is only temporary. He is the cold in the cold ones. He is the ageless, unyielding, utterly unapologetic king of the night. For as long as there is order to enforce and blood to spill, he will sit upon his marble throne, waiting for the world to break, so he can be the one to sweep up the pieces. This has been a deep dive into the heart of the Volturi. This has been the anatomy of a nightmare. Thank you for walking through the shadows with me. If you felt the chill of the giftless king, if you have found yourself drawn to the aesthetic of his ancient fury, then you have felt the pull of the velvet moon. Do not look for the light. Look for the truth in the dark. Until the next moon rises,